Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Self-Publishing Insiders. I am Jim Azevedo. I lead marketing and corporate communications here at Draft Digital. And today it is my privilege, my honor, to welcome to the show Roland Denzel. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. So let me introduce Roland, giving you guys a little bit of a sense of what he's all about here. So some of you out there, you might know Roland as a health coach or nutritionist and restorative exercise specialist. But the truth is that Roland has always been at heart an author first. Roland's written over 10 published books, two or three practice novels, dozens of short stories, several, thankfully, he says, unpublished screenplays, as well as hundreds of blog posts and articles, and at least one poem. Roland created the Indestructible Author in 2015 to help authors just like you be more productive and write more books, all while staying healthy, happy, and sane. By his own accounts, Roland does not write quickly. I'm in that club. And he makes so many typos, it hurts. I'm in that club too. Roland, thanks so much for being here. I'm so happy that you're here to join us today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Oh,
It's
it's my
awesome.
pleasure. Backstage, I was telling Roland that I've been looking so forward to this because I'm kind of a nutrition nerd. I stumbled across the topic going back probably about 12 or 15 years now. There were a couple of books. One of the books that really stood out to me was How Not to Die by Dr. Michael Greger. Who just I read that book. It was like a novel. It blew my mind that you could read a nutritional book. I mean, literally up at night when at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning, flipping through the pages, like, wow, oh my goodness. And it just really it changed my life. It changed the way not only it changed the way I eat, but it just changed the way I look at food and consider food when I'm just going about my day-to-day activities. At least it changed the way I thought about it now, and now I just don't think about it. I just live my life and eat healthily. So Roland,
You clearly haven't died.
no, I clearly haven't died, but I'm curious because looking back, you've been doing health and wellness for about 10 years now, right? Or does it go back further than that?
It was back before that. I mean, if it was sort of like a blur, it started off as personal and then kind of went into like helping friends and
Mm-hmm.
then other people who I just sort of met online and or in my local community, and then it's pretty much gone to where, it was ingrained in me at that point, and I had like
Mm-hmm.
educated, myself in certifications and then after that then it just became like a business of coaching, right? So
Okay.
yeah, and writing more books and yeah,
Can we
yeah,
talk about that origin story? Are you comfortable with that?
yeah,
Because I
sure,
did I did
absolutely.
I did a little digging, and you were a systems analyst at Xerox for what almost like 25 years, right?
Yeah, yes, and yeah, so systems analyst for 25 years. It's actually going on 30 now. So I'm still doing
You
work
still
with
doing
them.
it?
And
Okay.
yeah, so in my day job, I do a lot of sitting and now a lot of standing because there's a lot of, you stand at work a lot of times visiting
Yep.
customers and clients and helping them with color management and all, all the stuff that you would do at KDP Print or at Ingram. Like I help
Mm-hmm.
people do that stuff. So I'm not just a nutrition person. I also know all about the printing industry. So if anyone has questions about that and myths and mythologies
Excellent.
of that, I'm happy to chat about that at some point in the future. But yeah, so so I grew up. So my background is even before that, I grew up overweight. So I grew up
Okay.
pretty sedentary, overweight, and at one point I lost about 110 pounds, and I've kept it off ever since. So once I kind of figured out what my like once I had made that decision that I wanted to lose weight and keep it off, like I'd
Hmm.
yo-yoed for many years in the past,
Like
and
most people.
yeah, so like I decided like this is done, and I kind of like did a deep dive into like what was the root cause. There's like emotional eating, and there's
Okay.
whatever trauma backgrounds or like all those kinds of things, right? And one of the things that I had realized was that I was connecting my weight loss to my happiness. So like I was like, oh, if I
Mm.
lose weight, I'm going to be happier, and I'm going to meet a girl, and my shyness is going to go away,
Yeah.
and all these things. And then like I would lose like, 20 or 30 pounds, and I would go, I don't really feel any happier, and I can sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel, and like I'm not feeling
Hmm.
any less shy, and I'm still realizing I'm not going to be able to talk to that girl. And suddenly I would just go like, so what's the point? And I just stress out about it, go back to eating.
Yeah.
Whether I gave up or got overwhelmed and stressed out about it, I don't know, right? So I don't know that part of it. But I decided to uncouple, my happiness from my weight loss. I wanted to be happy first and foremost. And then after that, it was much easier for me to lose weight on my own terms. Like that was like a
How did
totally
how
different
did
thing. I
you
wanted to,
how did you manage to do that part? How did you decouple that? Did that take a lot of just internal work? Because that's not easy.
um, no, it's not. So it didn't happen right away, but like I was listening to, back in the day, like there was no streaming, so it was all like AM talk radio. I had a car that only had
Yeah.
AM radio for one thing, so that was kind of, so it was sort of limited to AM radio
Yep.
and talk radio. And there was somebody that was talking about happiness, like so he had psychiatrists and um, ministers and rabbis and everything on this thing
Hmm.
talking about happiness. Like this was his theme on like Fridays on the Friday drive, and he had a book about happiness and just a bunch of essays. And I just started reading these things. And, one of the things that, like, the first thing, I'm not saying this is the solution, but for
Okay.
me, it was that I had a responsibility to the people around me to not drag them down by me not being happy. So the first thing you do is like you put on an air of happiness. It's sort of like the fake it till you make it kind of a thing,
Hmm.
right? And what I found and what the books and some of the research said is that in certain circumstances, like depending on why you're unhappy, like if you act happy, you can actually, it's sort of a reciprocal thing. Like you act happy, the people around you respond with happiness back. And that makes you more happy. And then you can sort of drag yourself out of this. And then there's, therapy coupled with that as well.
Hmm.
And also all the tools that go with that, mindfulness and meditation. I didn't have those words for, all these words for it back then.
Sure.
Um, yeah, but between, I guess, choosing to do this and reading the book, listening to people on the radio, finding a therapist that I liked, that helped with that. And yeah, so then once that had happened, then I could say, you know what, I want to lose that weight now, whether I'm and specifically the trigger for losing weight was sitting with my daughter who was very small, and she asked for a glass of water. I went downstairs, not, just one flight, went downstairs, got a glass of water, brought it back up to her, and she goes, Daddy, you didn't have to run. And I had not run, but I was like, like I was
Mm.
really like panting. And that was when I realized, it'd be kind of cool to be around for my
Yeah.
kids, you know, yeah.
Yep.
So, so then, yeah. So then, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So then
Um,
all of my books and my nutrition background like started to like yes, I'm a nutritionist. I've been like trained in to be a nutritionist, but a lot of the stuff that I talk about is the systems and the processes that you put in place that make life easier to keep the nutrition you choose, and then eventually they become habits, and then you don't have to think about it anymore, because
yeah.
once it's a habit, you don't have to think about it. Like we all have bad habits, we just don't think about it, right? So but
Hmm.
like you think of everyone has a lot of good habits too, and you don't think about them. But that's the key. If you get the things that you want to do to the point where it becomes a habit, or at least much easier to do. You might consciously have to do it, but it's easier to do. You reduce those barriers, and then the rest of it becomes easier.
Okay. I'm curious, Roland, when you started your weight loss journey, did you get to a point where you felt like, hey, I think I'm onto something, and then it started getting easier for you? Because I do recall for me when I started going down, I'm completely plant based right now. But when I first started that, like you said, it was difficult at first because I didn't know what I needed to have in the house to make myself feel satisfied and satiated. And like many people, I had processed foods in the house, and that's a disaster because if you don't know how to keep yourself satisfied, you're going to go for the quickest thing you can possibly find, and and scarf that down as quickly as you possibly can. But then it takes 5 minutes to consume 1,000 calories, depending on what you've got in the house. So I'm
Yeah.
curious for you, did you get to a point where you're like, I think I'm onto something, and then at that point, did you notice besides weight loss other aspects of your life changing from your mood to your the clarity of mind and so on?
Yeah. So when I first started, it was like in 2003-ish, and very popular. You call it an app, but it was like an app on my Palm Pilot, right? So this is how old I am. We had Palm Pilots were
I'm right there with
that
your
were the
brother.
biggest thing back then. All right. So I had this app and it was called Calorie King. And they actually have like back then it might still be around, but they were in like the magazine section at the grocery store. They had the Calorie King guide, and this was
Hmm.
I'm like I'm not going to carry this guide around. But then like once I found out they had an app that I'm already carrying the Palm Pilot around, that became easier. So it's a little bit like MyFitnessPal. Like if you see the
Hmm.
app about MyFitnessPal allows you to track your movement and your food intake and count calories.
Sure.
And I had a lot of success counting calories. It was fun. It became like almost gamified for me to count the
Mm.
calories and like hit the exact amount of calories and like not go over and not go under, keep the average for the week, like all those kinds of things. But what I found was that eventually that I had gotten pretty skinny, but I was still flabby. And so it's like, they called it skinny fat back then, so and part of it was from having been so overweight. I had a lot of sort of excess, not excess skin so much, but excess, flab, I guess. And I did a little research into that, and I found a book by an author named Lou Schuler, who was, managing editor for I think Men's Health or Men's Fitness back then. And he wrote a book called
Hmm.
The Testosterone Advantage Plan, and it really talked about the benefits of it was not a low carb diet, but it was and it was not a high protein diet, but by the standards back then it probably was, right? So
Okay.
it talked about reducing your carbs a little bit and boosting up your protein and keeping healthy fats. And because the protein is more satiating than the carbs. So basically kind of it's like the carbs are the least nutritionally dense foods. They're calorie rich, nutritionally sparse, not a lot of nutrition in most carbs compared to other things, right? We're not talking about vegetables. We're talking about like like rice and wheat
Like
and
refined pastas
things.
and white rice and that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So like they might be delicious. They are delicious, but they're not the best choice nutritionally. They're okay to have, but not to base your diet on. So by reducing those, bringing the protein up a little bit, more satiating, and keeping a healthy level of fat, because fat is also satiating. Like once you have this base level of a certain amount of fat in your diet,
Hmm.
it all these things equal out. They keep you satisfied, satiated, or full, feeling longer. So once I did that and started doing more strength training, it kind of reversed that curve, and I started to gain muscle and while continuing to lose fat. And and that was sort of like the big change there, that nutrition is a big deal, not just calories. So calories still important, but nutrition plays a big role in how you can deal with those calories long term. Where you're not always hungry, because that was the big thing. I wasn't always hungry anymore because even though it was a
Right.
gamified, I was still hungry. but
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's okay if I'm a little hungry because I'm making progress. So by switching things up a little bit, changing the ratios around, I was less hungry, more satisfied, better progress.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I noticed that when I switched things around and started eating a cleaner, healthier diet, the brain fog and the brain fog went away. The afternoon crashes, especially after
Mm,
a big heavy lunch, ended. Like that never happens anymore. And it's been about 15 years, at least 15 years, since I've ever had a meal crash, a post meal just crash where I felt like
oh,
I
that's
wanted to
great.
sleep. Um, and I love that. So I'm interested in hearing from you. What causes that brain fog? What causes that crash? Is it carbohydrate related? And are all carbohydrates the devil?
Yeah, I think that no, no, no. So no to that last one. So I would say
Okay.
brain fog and the crash are two probably different things. So I'd say the
Okay.
brain fog is, I mean, they could be related. You could have an afternoon brain fog, which is probably related to the afternoon crash. But I would say like if you have generally brain fog overall, then it's probably like a baseline nutritional issue. Well, it's a huge. I don't want to discount sleep, rest, and anxiety, because those are like huge contributors to the brain fog, right?
Okay.
But um, so that's always a thing. Like you can't eat your way out of 4 hours of sleep. If you're only getting 4 hours of sleep, yeah, your better nutrition is going to help, but you still got to address the sleep. If you're always
Yeah.
got anxiety, you've got the stress of life going around, you got to find the low hanging fruit that you can attack to reduce those anxieties to get yourself back up. And then, of course, your nutrition is going to help. So the brain fog thing could be it could be specific things. It could be that you have like high levels of inflammation caused by some sort of nutritional balance. It
Hmm.
could be like if you've heard of omega 3s, omega 6s, there's like this
Yep.
balance you're trying to get. Like the solution is not a ton of omega 3s. The solution is to get a better ratio of omega 3s to omega 6s, which is kind of reducing your omega 6. Omega 6s are like the things that are in um, like soybean oil, like soybeans themselves, probably not a problem, but soybean oil, a lot of that has so many omega 6s. So omega 6s are ubiquitous. They're the cheapest fats
Hmm.
made by man. So they're in everything. So they in and of themselves are not bad. It's the ratios of them that we eat. And then humans have, historically speaking, thousands or hundreds of thousands, millions of years, have eaten higher ratios of things that have more omega 3s in them, fatty
Okay.
fish, or even animals that have these higher levels of fats. And it's not just the fact that they ate so much of those, they also ate a lot less of the other things. So, yeah, we've evolved over time, but we have not evolved so far we that we can't thrive without more of a balance in these healthy fats. So when our fat ratios get out of whack, specifically for too long of a period of time, like you can start to get this inflammation, and it's not like inflammation like, oh, it's hot, like you've injured yourself, but it's just sort of like the
Yes.
systemic kind of inflammation.
Like
And there's probably a
chronic.
more scientific word, chronic inflammation, right? So it's like not an exact science. Like when I say chronic inflammation, you can probably find people that say there's no such thing as chronic inflammation. So like there's probably a better term for it, but it's like saying there's no such thing as leaky gut. There is that's just the slang term we
That's the slang
call,
term.
those
Yeah.
things. Or like chronic fatigue syndrome used to be, oh, there's no such thing, but now we know that there is a such thing as chronic fatigue syndrome. Um, so there's all sorts of things. So forgive me if I speak in sort of like the common man slang terms
No, this is
sometimes.
interesting.
Um, yeah. So that's primarily the things that tend to cause the brain fog: sleep, rest, anxiety, things out of balance, and then and if your nutrition, just if you're vitamin deficient, if you're like you've too much sugar in general, like you get these things like um, just over time that keeps your baseline healthy nutrition level too low, and then like this brain fog is easier to to rear its ugly head. Yeah.
Okay.
So like once you're at this point, you are closer to your tipping point. Excuse me, you're closer to this tipping point. Or, and then what happens is after lunch, like a very healthy person should be able to have a high carb lunch and not have the afternoon slump because your body's resilient enough to deal with that. You have good blood sugar control. Your glucose sensitivity, which is good, which is high. High is a good thing. It's very sensitive. So it can react properly to surges of sugar and maintain that healthy blood sugar balance. But the more inflammation you have, the lower that nutritional baseline is, the easier
Hmm.
it is for your blood sugar to go up and your body to not be able to respond to it. So it responds
Okay.
by too much insulin, which can make a crash, or too much cortisol, which can cause all sorts of a cascade of hormonal things, which can lead to that sleepiness. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
So if our inflammatory response is the cause to not just fogginess or other chronic illnesses, what are some of the anti-inflammatory foods that you would recommend that we could snack on? If we're at our desk for multiple hours a day, what are the foods that we can keep in mind that have those anti-inflammatory properties?
Well, the first thing I would tell people is to not focus on foods that have anti-inflammatory properties,
Hmm.
but to focus on the ones that have inflammatory properties and reduce them, right?
Okay.
So, um, one of the things that I'm not going to sick I'm not going to use the name of the organization anymore, but in November, a lot of people like to write a book in a month, right? And so th- in October, people are like, I'm preparing for it. I'm putting here's all what snacks should I have in my drawer? Like all these things. And it's usually like all sorts of, it's gummy bears and
Yeah.
red vines or Twizzlers, depending on whatever you want. Or even if they're trying to be healthier, it's like, oh, whole grain Triscuits or whole grain, snacks, whole grain things. And the goal, and then it's like, oh, vitamin waters and like all these things that are in reality they're very again they're very high carb, again carb not bad, but if you are already at this level where your nutrition's not great, those carbs when you're hungry are just going to lead you to not writing more, not
Yeah.
versus writing less, right? So so instead of those kind of snacks, focus on things that have more protein. It could be like if you're a salty, crunchy kind of a person, they have, there's like chickpeas, there's those crunchy chickpeas or nuts, seeds,
That's my
or even
go-to.
like if you like a cracker, there's like seed-based crackers. There's like those grainless crackers, right? So that they do have carbs in them, but if you read the label, they've got protein, fat, and carbs in a crunchy, salty kind of a thing that appeals to you, but it's not going to cause that hormonal shift as much specifically, so those are the kinds of things. Also, if you eat meat, like a beef jerky or turkey jerky, things like that, they even have mushroom jerky, which is, I know, I've tried that, which is kind of a cool thing because it gives you that sort of
Hmm.
satisfying chewy thing that you
Hmm.
can go for. And a lot of times I recommend for people when they really comes down to like, what do you want to snack on? I'd say, well, just have like the same kind of thing you'd have as a meal, but just smaller,
Hmm.
right? That's maybe the perfect thing to have leftovers for because like, oh, that's not like we get in this habit of like finish. That's not enough to save. Like, so you just eat it at night, which is
Right.
bad, right? So, but like, what if you have like, oh, I only have a third of a serving, like of a dinner? That's not enough to
Hmm.
save. Well, it's enough to have a snack. So like,
Yeah.
save that little bit for a snack. Yeah, and then that's a great thing to have because it gives you it doesn't, it also sort of psychologically says this is a balanced thing. And now it's just a small lunch or it's a small dinner, and it's not going to like, oh, it's not going to encourage more snacking as much as something that you mentally think of just as a snack.
That's good advice. Really good advice. I have so many more questions, but I want to bring up some questions from our audience
Okay.
here. First one's from Guillaume. Guillaume asks, Roland, what drink is suitable to have with a full meal?
If you're looking for a drink for a full meal, I would say some sort of like a smoothie, where but not probably not a fruit smoothie, although there can be some fruit in it. It should be a smoothie that has protein, and was kind of doesn't matter what your protein source is, like your desired protein source. It could be, if you can handle dairy, whey protein is probably the best one. But then there's pea protein's really good, or on the plant-based side, I think the key is there's certain ones that you just don't people just don't like, certain ones that do, and there's also now these blends where they get the best, sort of the best of both worlds, where they can, because it's the grittiness and versus the smoothness and the ability for everything settles down. So protein, some sort of like vegetables, and make sure that there's some fat in it, so it's like a full thing. But you have to make it to where it can be where it tastes good. So choose vegetables that are not gross to you. Like some people like frozen spinach in their smoothies because, and if you're gonna put spinach in your smoothie, the best one is the frozen one that you buy from already frozen, because that's been blanched, frozen. All the cell walls have been broken and disrupted. So then when you blend it, it's much smoother. If you put raw spinach or even spinach you've blanched yourself into your smoothie, it's going to be so slimy and chalky, and you're going to get that oh, what is that? You know what I'm talking about, Jim? Like when you sometimes spinach can be give you that
Oh,
astringent
okay.
taste. Yeah,
Almost like a
like
dry.
eating a yeah, it's like eating a persimmon that's not ripe. You're like, oh,
Exactly.
I should not have done that. Yeah, yeah. So it could be
What if,
healthy fat, and not healthy fat like fish oil because that's gross in a smoothie. But like it could be, if you have nuts or seeds, those will probably provide the fat right there. But you could add a little bit, like not a lot, but just a little bit of sort of like olive oil or some sort of healthy oil that would, or butter if you like butter, just something to give you that level, a little bit of fat, enough protein, and then the rest is sort of there to make it enjoyable. Some fruit, some vegetables, so you have a lot of fiber to make it full. Because it really kind of has to be, it has to have a lot of that stuff at the core, because our brains don't register liquids the same way they do solids. And I feel like I'm really going off on the smoothie thing, but
that's interesting
the
though.
so what
Keep it
happens is
coming.
if you drink a smoothie, like for me, it's not a meal for me. It's the calories of a meal. That's all the nutrition of a meal. But my brain does not register fullness the same way with a smoothie. It does right away, but in half an hour, I'll be like, oh, I wish I didn't have that smoothie because now I want to have an actual meal. Versus some people I know, they can have a smoothie and they'll be fine for 4 hours until their next meal. They'll have
Yeah.
breakfast smoothie, they'll be fine. They'll have a lunch smoothie, they'll be fine. But for me, it's like that liquid doesn't register for
Hmm.
me.
And isn't it also true that like with some of that, when you add fats to let's say a salad or to a smoothie, some of those fats also help unlock some of the nutrients
Absolutely.
and the plant-based stuff, so that so those nutrients become more bioavailable.
Correct. That's very, very true.
Okay, I want to make sure that I'm answering Guillaume's question. So he's asking about what drink is suitable to have with a full meal.
Oh, with
So
a full
if
meal. I'm
he's
sorry.
no, that's I like the smoothie answer though too, because
Sorry,
that's
sorry,
important.
Guillaume.
So for me, I'm boring. Like I usually just
He's probably
have.
out there going, "That's not what I that's not what I asked. That's not what I asked."
So what do you think? Like water,
With
green tea.
Yeah,
If you
I mean, I think water's great.
shot of whiskey.
But mm, probably after dinner, probably like at the end of the day, especially if you want to write, especially if you want to continue writing. Um, but I would say, I mean, most of your calories should be from your food, not from your drink. So
Yeah.
primarily be low or no calorie drinks. So green tea is good. Like I grew up with my parents drinking coffee at dinner. Like It was like, like
Same.
with the waitress coming by and like topping off the coffee, like all until like 8 or 9 o'clock at night when we finally left the restaurant, or even at home making like a pot of coffee for dinner, like at dinner. Yeah. So iced tea, green tea, yeah, water, if you don't like, I mean, let me know. So a lot of people don't just like water. I don't know, so like you can do like a squeeze of fruit juice in there, squeeze of lemon juice in there, that kind of stuff. Yeah, but I think as long as pretty much anything is fine. Some people don't like to drink with meals at all, and that's fine too. Just as long as you're getting enough throughout the day, you're good.
Okay. I want to bring up the next question from Nicole. Thanks for this question, Nicole. Nicole asks, how to deal with emotional or stressful eating. Do you have any thoughts on that, Roland?
Mm, okay, I have many. Um, so it it's one of those things where you know yes, it's really easy to say you got to reduce your stress, right? But like that's not gonna, the fact that people are emotional eating, like I get can be emotional eater too. So the the biggest thing for entry level emotional eating, like it's like if you can recognize that you're doing it, that's one thing. Like one of the
Great
things that
point.
people say is like if you're really hungry, like if you were actually hungry, you would eat the turkey breast in the refrigerator, right? But if you're stress eating or emotional eating, you're going to look for something that's sad, that's giving you a dopamine response that's going to, um, you know, sort of give you, that's going to distract you from that emotion. Or like, so like if you're sad or anxious, like you have this thing, I gotta get this, I gotta get my serotonin levels up, or I get the dopamine hit. So you're gonna go to the refrigerator. Like you may not be hungry, but you think you're hungry. And like no one who's stress eating or emotional eating like stress eats a salad, right? But you would look at ice cream, or you might try it for a piece of fruit, but maybe that's not enough either because part of that stress is that you're eating something that you're actually you're actually craving, or sometimes it's because it's wrong on a subconscious level. It's so you get this little bit of a thrill. It's sort of like any other kind of addiction, like you
Yeah.
know uh, an alcohol addiction or drug addiction. Those are like the extremes, but also like there's gambling addictions. There's, phone addictions where like, like you get, like where you're getting looking for this dopamine hit, serotonin response from scrolling up and down your phone, and you just never stop, right? Because
Yeah.
you can't get enough. And it may not be that you can't get enough of your phone. It could be like there's something else, and you're just looking for something to drown out the rest of that world. So there are a couple of I mean, there are certainly some resources. I have people that I typically recommend, and there are a lot of good books out there on how to get this. But there are ways that you can. I'm not a nervous system response. I'm not a nervous system regulation expert, but that's one of the best ways to address it is by finding ways to when you recognize that that's happening, that you can bring your nervous system back on. You can because your nervous system is overly activated during that time of stress and emotional eating. So if you can find a way to regulate it through meditation, through some sort of mindfulness practices, through I mean, I want to say like using sort of mantras or something, but I don't know that that's the best way. I don't
Hmm.
think I'm using the term right, but that's sort of like yeah, so I mean, those things can certainly help, right? And because once you start to do that, that's gosh, my voice is going crazy. Um, those are great ways of addressing more of the root cause. Because
Hmm.
when you do these things, there's like deep down, like I hate to say, like it's all in your childhood and stuff like that, because it's not necessarily from the childhood, but it's almost always something that happened before. So I can trace my emotional eating back to when I was a kid and being lonely as a kid and things like that. And like when I get like that's the time when I want to eat the most is when when I'm
Yeah.
lonely, not when I'm stressed, not when I'm sick. Like I don't want to eat as much. But like when I feel lonely, that's when I want to eat the most. So sort of getting to the root of some of those things, but also finding ways to manage them through nervous system regulation.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And what I gleaned from that is it's all just a practice of becoming more mindful as well and learning about and paying attention to how what you're eating is impacting your life and how it's making you feel. And I want to remind people out there that, it's if you feel like you're overeating or you get into these situations where, you're eating out of stress or what have you, it's not necessarily your fault because just as Roland was addressing with phones and the addictive nature of phones and some of these devices that we're all using, that addictive behavior is literally built into the design of those devices to keep us doing just those things, just like some of these addictive behaviors are built into the ultra processed foods that we're eating. Like they have scientists who are working on these things behind the scenes
Yeah.
to ensure that we are just consuming this garbage out there, but it tastes so good. But yeah, but it's not the
Yeah.
best, feel for your body or for your
Yeah.
brains if you're trying to crank out a bunch of books. Um, and I better stop myself
Yeah,
there
that's
because
that
I
what you just said reminds me of the, the behind the scenes thing you mentioned. Like, so it's not even like it is behind the scenes, but like there was a, I don't know if you ever saw, but there was this 60 Minutes interview with these food scientists. And you think food scientist sounds pretty good, but these were like scientists, like more like flavor scientists and crunch
yes,
scientists, texture scientists. And they
they're
talked
addiction
about like,
scientists.
yeah, it's like,
Don't give them
like
undue
so,
credit.
like Doritos are dusty enough to so it gets underneath your fingernails. So like when you'll have that scent. Like I don't know how conscious
Yeah,
they are of doing these specific insidious things, but that's what it amounts to, right? You have this Doritos scent underneath your fingernails or on the tips
yeah,
of your fingers for longer. So you're going to want to eat more Doritos. Like maybe not now, but it's going to encourage you to get another bag down the road, right? Um, the same thing with like the biggest thing for me is the biggest example I have is barbecued potato chips. So if you notice, barbecued potato chips, they're delicious. They have this great barbecue flavor, but there's not quite enough barbecue flavor on them, right? So like you're like, oh, I'm gonna have I need to have another chip because that barbecue chip was amazing. It's got to be better. I'm gonna keep going. Got to keep going because
yeah,
they've dialed it in. These foods have been engineered to make you go back, and it's almost like they're in a big collective because like just I might buy Ruffles one day, but I'm gonna buy Lay's or like Doritos. Like I don't know that they're made by the same company, but like you know you could be addicted to Diet Coke, but if like Diet Coke isn't there, you might buy a Diet Pepsi.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the reason I said I got to stop myself because out of all the
I know.
books and the classes, I also have a nutrition cert. I got two nutrition certs, and then the more you learn about how the system is stacked against the consumer, it gets you angry because you just like we're trying to protect our families, and the large big companies out there are trying to, you know, please their investors. They're not necessarily in it to
Yeah.
make us
Hmm.
healthier.
Yeah.
But I'll stop there. Bring up a next comment and question from Layla, who asks, are there some common bad eating habits authors and other jobs that require a lot of stress and creative thinking are prone to, and how do you avoid them?
Common bad eating habits. Well, there's a couple. So like, um, for people who people they're always busy. So people are always looking for ways to make things quicker so that, like there are different ways to make things quicker. And in our mind, even though driving out to get fast food, if you add up all the time, it probably takes more time to go get the fast food and come back. Um, but the reason that it happens is because the time you save is you're also saving mental energy, right? So like you don't have to decide. You don't have to think, what am I going to make? What am I going to clean? What am I going to cook? How long is it going to take to cook? How is the cleanup process?
Yeah.
Like all these things for something, right? That I'm not going to be as satisfied with probably because we go back to the food, the food, the engineered food. Fast
Yeah.
food's also been engineered like that. Extra sodium, extra fat, all those kinds of things.
Yep.
So
Sugar, oil, and fat, or
bad
sugar,
eating
oil,
habits,
and sorry, sorry,
yeah, what is that? Salt,
salt, oil, and
sugars,
sugar. Yeah.
there's a really good book that talks about the science. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the common eating habits that authors have, I think, are we talked about the writing in November, like the not wanting to get up from my desk. Like the goal is to we say butt in chair time, right? That's like a common slogan that authors say. Butt in chair. You got to have your butt in chair. Well, that's great, but it shouldn't stop you from going to the actual kitchen to get an actual healthy snack or actual healthy meal, right? And spending some time away.
Yeah.
So authors tend to think, I don't want to get out of the groove. I can't, I'm in the swing of things and I can't stop. So I have to have a snack in my drawer, right? And it has to be something that I can eat while I'm typing, that kind of thing. But it's a vicious circle, right? So like if you, that is a habit, but also it could be a habit the other way. Like it takes time to develop this habit of taking a break from your writing and not losing your momentum, right? So like that's a skill that you can develop. It's a skill that I've developed. Some people like the Pomodoro, some people hate it, but you can use that type of mentality to train yourself to write in short periods, take a break, and then get back without losing touch, without losing your momentum. So that's one habit, like
Mm-hmm.
prioritizing convenience over health, because those convenience foods aren't, and that convenient food mentality isn't as healthy long term. And so it's going to lead to poor nutrition, poor health, which is going to make that harder. So it's a vicious circle. Um, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one. So
Okay.
I've noticed a trend both with some authors who, like, I'm a proponent of batch cooking, not of batch cooking for
Same.
leftovers, but my batch cooking is on like Saturday or Sunday. I will make a lot of components that I can put into dishes throughout the week. So it
Yeah.
could be like like a big roast, or you could buy a rotisserie chicken, or you could make a whole bunch of roasted vegetables. Like it's like these things you cut them up and you make them and you season them, and then you can make them into like a rice bowl and a burrito and in tacos, or you could make
Yeah.
soup out of all of these things with like just a few minutes, so it's super easy. And then the benefit here is that like two things are out of your mind, like, so you don't have to think about it because now you've put all your mental energy in on Saturday or Sunday, and so the other stuff's pretty much easy. And then the cleanup is easier because you did all that made the big mess on Saturday or Sunday. And yeah, so then it makes it mentally easier to switch. The big pushback I have is that, well, two. One is I don't like leftovers. Well, so I'm not saying leftovers. I'm not saying make a big pot of chili and eat it for 3 times a day for the rest of the week. I'm saying make these core foods.
Yeah.
If you like leftovers, just get into the leftovers too, or mix and match. Have some leftovers and some of these core foods, these base foods. But the other pushback I get is like authors being proud of the fact that they make their dinner from scratch every night, or and I get it. I love to cook, but then I have to ask, well, like it's not, first of all, I don't think your family's going to be, embarrassed by you, or like going to be like, oh, I can't believe dad or mom didn't, cook from scratch tonight. They used this thing, they made to make tacos, right?
Yeah.
So it's a mentality shift. But I have to ask, like all of these things, is it more important for you to write your books, or is it more important for you to cook from scratch every night? Like,
Yeah.
which would you value more? At least in the right now, it's like something to try. So I think prioritizing other things, prioritizing foods in a way that's not the most important thing if you really think about it. So you kind of have to get in touch with like, what do I really want? What do I really want to do? Right? Do I want
Okay.
to, it's not to be saying that you can't have like some special night where you cook something from scratch. You don't have to eat those core foods every night. But if you can save yourself like 3 hours a week by doing this batch cooking and leftover thing, like that's 3 hours more writing that you could be doing. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
quick quick comment here from our mutual friend Becca Syme, who says, "Ah, the resistance of healthy habits." I love this.
yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
Becca,
That's a big,
thanks for
it's,
joining.
yeah, yeah,
Real
that is a
quickly, because we're already,
challenge because,
I wanted to, yeah, it is, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're getting close to time, and I wanted to ask you just real quick,
what?
Roland, can you? I know it goes by like that.
Oh,
Uh, can you address the difference between a nutritionally dense food versus a calorie dense food? Because when the comment came up, I think it was from Layla talking about bad eating habits for those of us who are stuck at our desks all day long, which is basically all of us. Can you address that really quick? The difference between a nutritionally dense food and a calorie dense food?
sure. So let's use two plant foods for an example, right? And
Okay.
we could start with extremes. So like broccoli or kale or Brussels sprouts, any sort of like, or zucchini, any sort of vegetable, right? Doesn't have a lot of calories, but per calorie, there's a lot of nutrition. There's a lot of vitamins, fiber, and things per calorie. And but if you look at the opposite end of the plant spectrum, wheat flour, like or bread that's made, so like it's got a lot of calories. I mean, you'd be surprised, like really, if you look at some of these like hamburger, but like a nice hamburger bun, like they could be like 350, 450 calories.
Yep.
Well, but if you look at yeah, maybe there's some fiber on there, but fiber's not really nutrition. There's like a baseline of fiber you need, right? But that fiber is just sort of, the vegetable probably has that much fiber too, and you could eat more of those vegetables for the same amount for fewer calories and get that same amount of fiber. Plus, if you go into there's like nutritiondata.com is like a free website you can look at if you're curious about certain nutrition. You can plug in your favorite vegetable or vegetables that you even kind of like and plug in like wheat flour or bread or something like that, and it will break down all of these. And I think you can even compare two foods, and it will do like a charts of the different things, and you'll be like, wow, there's so little nutrition for so many calories in some of these
Yeah.
things. So obviously there's a big scale. So like there are breads that have more that are smaller, right? Because you don't need to have this huge bread, right? You could have a smaller piece of bread that actually has like the sprouted grain breads. They are not vegetables per se, but they're closer to vegetables because they have the nutrition of something that's been sprouted is quite a bit more than just a seed that's been ground up. Um, and what do you call it, sorted, got all the, a lot of the fiber and the germ is gone. So yeah, so like, and even then, like if you like starchier carbs, like bread is one thing, but then like rice has different nutrition, and so maybe a little bit more dense. Then you get to like lentils and beans, or the
Hmm.
combination of beans and rice, which is like they work synergistically to to get a lot of the protein to create complete sources of protein. So those are going to be more dense than that bread would be. So there's like a sort of a sliding scale of these things, and that bun makes you satisfied at the time, but not very long term, versus the vegetable, not maybe not as satisfying emotionally, right?
Hmm.
But it will keep you satiated for longer because it has more micronutrition and fewer calories. Yeah.
Okay. That's
Does
so
that
interesting.
explain? Does that?
That's what hooked me on this whole pathway in the very first place. When you learn about the calorie density of, say, eating a bag of chips, it's like, bang, there's like 500 calories right there. And I finish that bag in 2.5 minutes. But then you can have like a whole salad, which maybe has, I don't know, 100, 150 calories, but it's packed. And you've got so
Yeah.
much nutrition that you're ingesting during that time. And it'll
Yeah.
keep you satiated with all the fiber and everything, but you also have all of this nutrition that you've just ingested to keep yourself
Yeah,
healthier.
yeah.
Well, gosh, as always, we are at the end of time, and it went by in a blink. This was a wonderful conversation, and I hope that our viewers out there got some good educational value out of it as well. And Roland, I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank all of our viewers out there for joining us week in and week out. If you enjoyed this episode, if you could do us a favor and like the episode and share it with your friends, we really, really appreciate it because it helps us not only expand and get our message out in front of more people, but it also helps us to attract guests and experts like Roland. If you bookmark dddlive.com, you can see what our subsequent guests or who our subsequent guests will be and what our topics will be. And then finally, if you are new to the publishing world and you're thinking about self-publishing a book, you can sign up for a free account simply by going to draft2digital.com. Again, thanks everybody so much for joining us here today. Roland, thank you so much for your time and energy and care when it comes to your books and to this topic specifically. If you can hang out for a second, Roland, I'll meet you backstage.
Sure.
Great. I'm going to play just a quick commercial for everybody else.
Thanks.
We'll see you.
Thank you, everybody. It's been great. It's been great. Thank you, everybody.
We're so happy to have you here. We'll see you all next week.
Ebooks are great, but there's just something about having your words in print. Something you can hold in your hands, put on a shelf, sign for a reader. That's why we created DDD Print, a print-on-demand service that was built for you. We have free, beautiful templates to give your book a pro look, and we can even convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound cover for print. So many options for you and your books. And you can get started right now at draft2digital.com.